Now, the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, NEL Fund, has received over 1 million applications for its student loan scheme since its launch on May the 24th of 2024. Managing Director Akintunde Sawyerr said the response reflects a growing trust in the initiative and the rising demand for fair access to higher education financing in Nigeria. NEL Fund has disbursed more than 116 billion naira in loans, covering tuition and living expenses for students across universities, polytechnics and colleges of education. The program promotes equal access to tertiary education, supports human capital development, and ensures transparency, efficiency, and inclusivity for all Nigerian students.
Well, for more on this development, we're joined in the studio by Mr. Akintunde Sawyerr. He is the Managing Director of the Nigerian Education Loan Fund. Thank you for joining us. Well, we saw that statement from your office celebrating this milestone, in quote. Can you talk us through why this is a celebration? It is a loan, not grant.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning to you, Constance. Good morning, Yolanda.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me on the show. Look, 1 million applications in 16 months in a country that has had lots of difficulties with its education sector. Applications for loans, interest-free loans, I might add, for people to be able to attend and remain in tertiary institutions is a big deal. It's a big deal because before now we had a very high dropout rate in this country. So many people would go to these institutions, they would be funded at the beginning, they might go for 2 or 3 years. In other words, they go year 1, year 2, year 3, and just before they finish or they graduate, they run out of funds. Something devastating happens in their family or to their finances, and they end up having to drop out. The frustration levels are huge in that regard. What you're seeing today, with over 1 million applications, is what I would call a global acceptance. When I say global, I mean within Nigeria.
Right.
A global acceptance of the importance of education and a recognition that actually funding is a major issue in terms of giving access to people to be able to get this education.
I mean, over 1 million applications, it just reflects the magnitude and scale of the problem we're dealing with. Does this even touch, a quarter of the problem?
Well, it depends on how you describe the problem.
Right.
So my description of the problem is that there's a loss of hope for people who are traveling through or climbing up the education ladder. They feel that as soon as they get out of secondary school, there's really nowhere else for them to go. That's one of the problems. The other problem I described a minute ago is that people are already in institutions and are having to drop out. You can imagine the level of frustration in that regard. Another part of the problem is that 80% of families who fund, of families in this country, sorry, I beg your pardon, I'll start again. 80% of the family income is spent on education. So you can imagine the frustration levels and the stress levels on parents trying to educate their children. Now, you said, what percentage is it? If you look at the numbers of people in tertiary education in this country, particularly in the public sector, it looks like around 3 million. If we've had 1 million applications, it's a significant dent in that. And we've only been going for 16 months. So you're going to see this get better and better. The president is very mindful of the impact this is having. This was his program, and I think he recognizes that this is working very well. We're at the beginning. We're going to carry on going. Yolanda.
Now, allow me to just jump in here. Sorry to cut you short, but let me play the devil's advocate here a little bit. 1 million applications in a country that has about 96 million people who are under the age of 18. Is this not a drop in the ocean?
I think it absolutely is when you look at it in the context of what we need to do to intervene in education. I think you've always got to put these things into context. In that context, you're absolutely right. It's a drop in the ocean. However, we will all come to realize that, you've got to start somewhere. And we have started with tertiary education funding. If you look across the educational landscape, there are skills programs. So this isn't You know, the reforms that you're seeing in education go beyond what we're doing. There are skills programs, TVET programs being organized by the Ministry of Education. There are all sorts of initiatives to ensure that the standards of teaching are increased or raised. Lecturers are being looked after much better, or at least there are certainly plans in place to make sure that lecturers are happier. So this is putting it into context. The country, by the way, has what, 220 odd million people?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're right, 96 million are young people. But not all young people want to go to university. Not all of them are looking for funding to go to polytechnic.
Good point.
There are other things that people need to be doing. And so we need to look at this in the grand context of the opportunities available for those 96 million young Nigerians.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the bigger picture and looking at it in the long term. So that leads me to my next question, which is on sustainability. Nigerian initiatives such as this, many in the past, have, you know, always had this grand story of how things are being done and how amazing it is. But how sustainable is this? You know, how confident are you that NEL Fund will actually be able to recover and sustain what it is currently putting forward?
Yolanda, that's a beautiful question. You know, there's absolutely no point in starting anything unless you can keep it going.
Absolutely.
Particularly if it's something that's impactful and good. Look, we have a number of plans that we're looking at to ensure that this can carry on. One is obviously that the students are going to be repaying. So there'll be some repayment, and this is a revolving fund that will allow those repayments to have some impact on those who are coming behind. Beyond that, we believe, and the law that the President sent to the National Assembly ensures that we can raise funds from sources other than government. In this country today, in Nigeria today, there are many, many people who are funding wards and their children through education. There are many people who are paying school fees for lots of young people. We have become a veritable platform for them to channel that through. We have convening power because we have funds. We have buying power. We have the strength of getting commitment discounts from institutions. We have very strong bargaining power. So we can even get into the business of lowering the fees because we're paying the institutions in bulk. This means that the naira that we're spending and the access to education that these young people are getting is going to be stretched. I think the most important element of sustainability is the engagement of the private sector. The private sector has a lot to contribute to education, not just in Nigeria, globally. And I'll tell you why. When these people graduate, when they qualify, when they're educated, they're generally absorbed by the private sector. The private sector needs good skills, good people, well-trained people. So they recognize that it's important for them to be part of this program. It's important for them to be part of this arrangement. So what we're doing is we're ensuring that the private sector understands what we're doing. If you notice, one of the things that we're absolutely keen to do is to ensure that there is transparency in everything that we're doing. That transparency helps us to let the private sector know that we're doing the right things. It allows the private sector to be able to say, these are the courses you should be funding, these are the standards that we expect from people that we're going to be employing after you've funded them.
All right. As a follow-up to that, you've mentioned something very important about sustainability. So in other climes where it is more developed, there is a structure and there is a system. So it means that when students graduate from school, they get jobs most times. Even if they don't get the jobs of their dreams, they get some kind of job to get going, and then they begin to pay back their loans. In this instance in Nigeria, we still have a struggling economy. So how do you deal with loan defaultment? That's, I think you must have considered as a factor on how this impacts the NEL Fund.
Sure. So, Constance, one of the key things about this loan is that it's got very soft terms. We want to encourage people to get an education. We will never do that if we put big barriers in front of them. So these loans are interest-free. In other words, we're not charging interest. The first thing that tells you is that this is not a commercial arrangement. This is a welfareist program. This program is leaning not towards making money for the NEL Fund or anybody else. It's leaning towards ensuring that people are able to access education. There are going to be defaulters. You've rightly identified that employment is a struggle in Nigeria.
Not even menial jobs.
Well, you know, the truth about it is that we're educating people to go beyond and above the menial jobs.
Right.
You know, the way that we look at this is that students will graduate, they will create work, they will create jobs. Employers, if they find that the workforce is getting more skilled, more educated, more competent, they will invest more in their businesses, they will employ more people. So from our perspective, the terms are low. The students only pay back when they have a job, and that is a deliberate skewing towards encouraging them to get the jobs, not looking at default rates or who we're going to go after. And also, it is the obligation of the employer that employs the person to look up and see whether that person has a loan, and the employer then deducts 10% and pays it back to the NEL.
Okay, no, hold on. Let me just ask this quickly as another follow-up. And so it all sounds very flowery, you know, and wonderful. You know, as always, we have these initiatives of government, and we have grand plans and all of that, which is good. But have you thought about also, in the past, a lot of government initiatives were torpedoed by political interference, by the involvement of political officers, or they want their children to be the ones to get the loans and things like that. So can you give us a breakdown of the demography of people that are getting these loans? Is it based purely on needs? Is it based on federal character? What is going on? And how do you ensure that that political interference does not bury this program?
It's a really good question, and you know, it's important to understand that in every society on this planet there is politics. In every society there is a degree of selfishness. People want things for themselves. That's why we have socialism, we have capitalism, because there are people on both sides of the divide and those in the middle. But I think your question is speaking to what we are doing about that. So our approach is that this program, because it's a loan, must be entirely voluntary. You cannot force people to take a loan because it should be paid back. There's no federal character involved in this. There's no gender bias involved in this. The only bias we have is to ensure that those who need it hear about it and are given the easiest possible pathway to getting this loan.
Right.
That's our approach. So, but in terms of the spread, we are going all over the country, because the one thing we cannot afford not to do is not to make sure that as many people hear about this and know how to access this loan as possible. After that, it's up to them.
Now, interestingly enough, I actually had the same question as Dr. Constance, but just worded slightly differently.
Sure.
I think that this type of initiative will be met with so much skepticism because of what many people have been through. So if you can just take our last few moments to speak to the viewers, speak to somebody who wants to go to a polytechnic, who wants to go to a university and feels like, this might not exactly be for me, I may not be chosen. Can you just give...
there might be a lot of hurdles. How
absolutely.
do I get in?
So me hearing about NEL Fund for the first time, what do I do? How do I access a loan? How do I know if I'm eligible? Where do I go now after hearing this interview?
Thank you very much. I think they call this the elevator pitch, yeah?
Absolutely, yes, that's right.
We're giving you the platform.
You're giving me the platform.
Absolutely.
Okay, so look, thank you for this. It's a really great opportunity to educate a few people out there. The reality of it is, the first thing is that this loan can be applied for only using an online platform, www.nelf.gov.ng. In other words, it's agnostic. The platform doesn't see who you are, whether you're male, female, disabled, tall, dark, light, handsome, beautiful. It doesn't care. As long as you have some certain pieces of information that you can put into the system, your NIN, your national identification number, your JAMB registration number, your matriculation number or admission number, you have to have a BVN because this is a bank associated loan. And of course, your name, your full name, and your date of birth. And I'll tell you what we do with all of this information. We match it. we electronically match it to ensure that, you know, the person that is talking to us online, okay, digitally, is the person that they say they are. The final thing is that your institution must have your records. So the institution provide us with the records that I just talked about now. Because again, we match, a bit like when you go to an ATM and you put in your 4-digit PIN, it matches with what the institution has provided us with. So I can tell you that this loan is fair, it's equitable, and anyone who's in a tertiary institution, in a publicly owned tertiary institution, can access this loan. I thank you for the opportunity for the elevator pitch.
Yes.
I'm very happy for people to make contact with us, to ask more questions about how we do things. They can go to our website. And I think it's also important that we continue to apply for these loans, because that will encourage this administration to continue to support it. The President is fully behind this. I think he's very excited that finally Nigerian students are getting access. I think President Tinubu has done a great thing with this. Let's take advantage of it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sawyerr. Hopefully all students will be able to take advantage of this initiative. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have here on Daybreak. My name is Yolanda Robert. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Constance Ikoku. Thanks for being on Daybreak with us, Sam. The morning show is next.